Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is Dr. Will Dobud. Dr. Dobud is an award-winning researcher, educator, and social worker recognized for his international expertise in youth mental health and clinical excellence. He currently serves as a senior lecturer at Charles Sturt University, Australia's largest social work school, and has a distinguished career practicing across the United States, Australia, and Norway. As the co-author of the new book, Kids These Days, Dr. Dobud is a leading advocate for positive deviance, challenging harmful industry fads to create environments where teenagers can truly thrive. Today, I'm joined by Will to explore the wicked problem of youth mental health by examining how modern interference, over-medicalization, and the safety trap are harming adolescent development, ultimately offering positive deviance and a return to risky, independent experience as the keys to truly empowering the next generation. Welcome to the show, Will. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I know we've already talked about Social Work Month, so I'm excited to be talking with another fellow social worker today.
Absolutely. It's always good to sit across the Zoom with someone from the same genre. But let's get started here. In the inspiration for this book, I know that it came about during a conference in Norway in 2022, where you noticed that while therapy practice were seemingly to improve, global trends for youth were worsening. What was that specific moment like from the standpoint of a clinician, and how did it lead you and Professor Nevin Harper to decide to write this protest type of book?
Yeah. So Nevin and I connected. We were in the outdoor therapy world. Nevin's from Canada. I'm from Washington, D.C. I work a lot in Australia as well. But Nevin and I connected in the outdoor therapy world and weirdly had this synergy of both being able to go work and have fun in Norway. I'll say have fun in Norway and call it work, more like it. But Nevin and I found an article Nevin had written a while ago. He wrote it in 2010, and I found it probably in 2016, and we got connected and we started writing academic papers together that, they're hard to read. No one reads them. They're all behind a paywall. They're more boring. But Nevin, I could tell, was reading the same stuff I was reading, which is that this paradigm of the medical model of, I have nothing against evidence-based practice, but this notion of what it is was changing the way we trained therapists, thought about therapists. So Nevin and I are both kind of a bit anarchist and, protesty people. So we were writing things together, trying to get our field of outdoor therapy to change. And I think he made me delete this from the book, but we were sitting around a fire having a glass of wine. And I said, and Nevin was like, we need to look at youth mental health. We have a treatment prevalence paradox. More kids are treated more than ever before. More kids see therapists more than ever before. More kids are medicated. So much so we find medication runoff in fish. Like, this is how much antidepressant and we've had a shortage of stimulants for ADHD over the last 2 years. So we're seeing more people are treated for these things, but the population prevalence keeps getting worse.
Yep.
And it doesn't keep getting worse for other age groups. I think it's like 50 to 75-year-olds have worsening mental health, and then youth are the worst. It keeps getting worse.
Wow.
And we couldn't wrap our heads around it. So what Nevin did is he said, we should write a book about this. And I said, I don't see it. I can't wrap my head around what we're actually going to say here. That won't be like a therapy book we've already written together, which is outdoor academic stuff. So what he did, though, is he just started interviewing people that we would call experts on the topic. Like, I think his first interview is with Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who wrote with Gabor Mate this book, Hold On to Your Kids, which is about Attachment-Based Parenting. It's a lovely book. It's really great. And I listened to the interview, and for the first 30 minutes of this Zoom recording, I thought, there's nothing here. There's nothing that Gordon Neufeld hasn't already said.
Mhm.
And then he took his kids' gloves off and really started speaking, I think, as someone who's maybe about to retire, maybe at the end of their career. I thought, oh, this is kind of brave. This is cool. Like, this is interesting. And Nevin just kept talking to people. And then the wall behind me, I got A3 pieces of paper and put up each interview and the notes I was taking. And I looked like the Unabomber behind me. Like, it was all like a conspiracy of notes and post-it notes and
Mhm.
yarn and things. And I just thought, how do we actually tie all this together? But I
Yeah.
think the thing we really wanted is that you talked about before we started about how it can remind people about how we parent. And I
Yes.
didn't want to tell people what to do. Again, Will and Nevin don't like telling people what to do and don't like being told what to do. So I didn't want to tell people what to do, but I wanted to write a book that ideally could give people access to someone's opinion, and then also information that two people, as in myself and Nevin, don't agree on. We don't agree on everything in the world, so we fought
Yeah.
with each other in a fun way. Like, we love each other dearly. You know,
Yeah.
we argued with each other to present a book that we hope the reader argues with, that the reader can
Mm.
go, I'm going to take this idea, I'm not going to take that idea, and I'm going
Yeah.
to take that into my life and make my best informed decision. Because no matter how smart I think I am, or how smart Nevin thinks he is, or how good we think our book is, our book has never met your children. So
Mm.
you need to make your own mind anyway. So
Yes.
that was sort of the hope of the whole thing.
Absolutely. And before we got started, I mentioned that I started reading this book with the idea, like you mentioned, that it would be a therapy book. So in my head, I'm reading this more as a social worker, I think,
Mm.
or a former school social worker thinking about adolescence, but probably not even a full chapter in. I was like, wait a minute. This doesn't feel like what I
Wrong
thought
book.
this was going to feel
Yeah.
like. Like, this is
Mm.
not, I need to switch the hat from, not to necessarily take fully off the social work one, but potentially put that parent one on too, because I think he's going to step on all of my toes here. But maybe I need them stepped on. I'm open to learning,
Well,
that pain. I'm okay with that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It feels more like a how-to manual then, not necessarily the therapy book that I thought it was gonna be. And so how do you wish for the book to be received by parents and mental health professionals? Like, what do you think that we should gain from reading this book and experience it? And what are, I guess, one back to basics type of shift that you hope people make after reading it?
Well, I think I wanted for let's start with parents. I think with parents, a lot of what we read in parenting books, and like I said, I didn't want to have 5 steps or 7 rules or
Mhm.
whatever. How, you can go to the airport and buy that book and get told what to do and get a checklist for how to
Yeah.
parent your kid. And because we talked about the research that, and then what will happen is you'll feel like crap after that stuff doesn't work, and you
Mhm.
go, oh my gosh. And then every other parent around you will lie to you about how wonderful their kids are, and you're going,
Oh, don't they?
what am I doing here? What's going on?
Well,
So one of the so for parents, I wanted a book that cut through the noise of things and wasn't fear mongering. I did not
mm,
want to scare parents. I'm not like, I'm pretty, uh, I like in the news this week. I don't know when this will come out, but in the news this week, we're all talking about this lawsuit about, social media and stuff.
oh, yes.
Like,
Mhm.
that stuff does not interest me at all, any more than worrying about video games, any more than worrying about pinball, any more than worrying about the kaleidoscope when it came out in 1818. That's the OG original scroll. Like, kids were walking into walls with a kaleidoscope in 1818. Like,
Crazy.
we've worried about these things. So I didn't want a parent's attention to be distracted into a moral panic about something. And let me say another version of this. Like, we talk about this later in the book. Like, when we put missing children on milk cartons, what happened was we put one missing child on 1 million milk cartons. It looked like there were millions of missing children.
Mm.
And the truth is, no one wants their child to go missing. Of course not. But stranger danger and 24-hour news and milk cartons scared the crap out of everybody.
Yes.
And now what we're seeing down the line is the rate, the range that children can roam from their home has reduced greatly. And so we saw something that scared parents, got their attention, but maybe for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to write something that was, we used this mantra after, and speaking of scaring people, we have a chapter about environmental toxins because Nevin interviewed this researcher, and this is, again, another one Nevin and I fought with greatly. It was so fun. You know, Nevin interviewed this toxins researcher, and I said, I listened to the interview, an amazing researcher standing up for young people's public health, standing up for the most vulnerable people's public health, protesting against the government, on the EPA panels, working for California Attorney General's office. And I said, Nevin, if we have this chapter, we're going to scare everybody to death. Like, this is terrifying. But what this scientist, Bruce Lanphier, said to us was, he goes, I'm paraphrasing Bruce here. He said, I am only writing with the public interest in mind. What should they know so that they can make an informed decision about their life? Because if we really took like agricultural practices and we're scared as much as we probably should be, we'd never go out to dinner again. Like, that's not viable, right? So that became a mantra for us. So I said to Nevin originally, I said, you can take this toxins, vanity chapter of yours, bury it at the end of the book where no one will get to and no one will read it. Now it's chapter 4. It just crept up one at a time. So it was, for parents, I think it's sort of a public interest thing of, how do you help your kid when they go to therapy? How do you navigate social media? How do you navigate rising rates of self-identification of mental health labels? How do you navigate, how do you make an informed decision about how we think about this generation or that generation based on what we've done forever, which is complain about every generation? So then for therapists, the thing I think that was most important is all of our ideas as a therapist come from somewhere. So if we look back to like the 1980s and strategic therapy, family systems, all these ideas come out. And it was during the Cold War where everything was strategic. We had war games. So these ideas come from a cultural time and place, right? I know most of us will agree here that, clients have resources, right? And so, but resources is how a farmer talks, right? Like, do you cultivate resources? Do you mine for resources? How do we go find these resources? So these come from our society and the way we think. And I wanted this is my own passion project, but I really like to attach therapy to culture. Like I think, with Freud, you look at Austria and you see this really patriarchal society where men don't talk to each other. So no wonder people laid down on a couch and stared at the ceiling, and the therapist sat out of view of you, and you didn't really talk to each other. Therapy comes to America, we're all much more oppositional and much more opinionated, and we start going, I'm going to just talk to you, So culturally, therapy is different. Now, at the same time, so many of our therapy ideas are dressed up in medical language. They're dressed up in a whole lot of white male academic type of language, and not to be like overly like woke about this idea or whatever that means now, but they come from places that don't come from culture. And
Right.
so for kids, when we talk about social justice, we often talk about cultural background, all these things, and age is almost always left off the table. So if we named a therapy actually designed for kids, maybe play therapy,
Maybe play.
CBT,
Outdoor
not made for
therapy.
kids,
Mm-mm.
psychoanalysis, not made for kids,
Mm-mm.
diabolical behavioral therapy, not made for
Mm-mm.
kids, you know? So what's
Mm.
interesting is I wanted to write, like, for therapists, like, some of the ideas that we're trained in, we have to take off the lens of our professional training when we get into the real practicing world to start going, where did these ideas come from and how did they become entrenched into our world? So like we ended chapter 1 just talking about how could it have been possible that homosexuality was in the DSM until 1987? What does this say about what's in there now that we will look back on and go, how on earth was this
Yeah.
allowed? And so, like, we cited research that 90% of psychologists report in survey data having an ethical problem with the DSM. And I'm sitting there going,
Mm.
and none of us can do anything about this? So we have a problem that none of us are going to stand up and do something about. So I wanted to
Mm.
sort of, and this is a theme of the book, I wanted to write something about deviance. Like, how do we actually deviate from this system that seems to not work for a lot of people, and to be centered on all the people who have power, the insurance companies, our professional associations, and they all are dictating these things that somehow, to me, the evidence doesn't add up. So I wanted to equip parents with knowledge of what's going on, where these ideas come from, and not scare them. And I think simultaneously, I wanted to talk to therapists about some of the ideas that we're told to talk about with our clients might not be the right thing, or unconsciously we might be propping up a system that maybe in our heart we're actually really against. And
Mm.
that doesn't mean not getting paid and not making money. I'm not
Right.
anti that. But it's sometimes we're stuck in a really uncooperative mental health system that is
Absolutely.
more in line with labeling and pathologizing kids than working with them.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. It's a very interesting system to work within, especially when you don't necessarily agree with it, but you still need the system to live. It's a tough spot to be in
It's
as a
it's the
clinician.
plight of a modern day. I mean, this is the life of a social worker,
Yep, it
that
is.
we live between a rock and a hard place, and the rock and
Mhm.
the hard place are hardly ever our clients.
Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
it's usually everything else.
Trying to
Yeah,
fit the pieces that don't necessarily fit.
100%.
And looking just at the title of the book, Kids These Days, and I'm doing the air quotes because I hear that all the time from other
Right.
parents, other clinicians, hear it all the time, these kids these days. And it's always in a negative connotation. And they don't go to school now because the weather's bad. And they send us all the time. It's always in some form of negative, and how kids are, so much more entitled and things like that. And so it gives the idea that this is new. But in reading your chapter that describes the kids these days effect, I found it so interesting that the idiom dates all the way back to Socrates and even before. So
Yeah,
even over 2,000 years ago, people were discussing kids these days. That's kind of crazy to me. Can you
yeah,
explain or dig a bit deeper into the kids these days effect and
yeah.
how it shapes the way that adults perceive and treat, kids, teenagers today?
This is a funny thing, especially like given today's politics, right?
Mm.
Which is make something great again,
Yes.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
when was that? When did that
Mm.
exist exactly? It
Mhm.
doesn't exist. But adults always complain about modern times, right? Like
Yeah.
one of my superheroes, Henry David Thoreau, was like, I need to go live in a cabin in the woods in Massachusetts for 2 years because of modern times. Like the car hadn't been invented yet, you know? Like so we do this where we only live in the times we're living in, and then we have this nostalgia bias about this time that existed that must have been great, you know? So a good example of this in modern times is everyone's very worried about technology in the classroom, right? I'm willing to bet if we surveyed teachers in the 1980s, they would have a massive problem with children doodling in their classes or passing notes.
And passing
Everything that's
notes.
in
Mom's
movies
passing
that we
notes.
grew up
Yeah.
with, right?
Hmm.
Everything. Like schools have banned yo-yos. Fidget spinners took a while actually to take off in the
Yes, they
positive
did.
direction.
Hmm.
In the 1980s, the pager, right? People
Oh, I
thought
have
all
one.
kids were drug dealers because they had a
Yes.
pager, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the calculator was a problem. We thought no one would ever
Mhm.
learn math because of so we just human beings. Let me just not put that on all adults. We actually really struggle with change,
Oh, yeah.
and kids are the change.
Mm.
So you go back to like our world of social work, like Jane Addams is my real superhero. I
Oh, yeah.
think if I think of what the word progressive means
Hmm.
today, I go, I think all of us need to go read some more Jane Addams. She
Hmm.
was remarkable and believed some stupid things of her time as well.
Yes.
There was
Yes, she
weird
did.
eugenics and weird
Hmm.
things that were not cool, right? But she had ideas about ending racism through democracy, getting people together and doing things, amazing ideas. But what's funny is Jane Addams complained about modern times all the time, right? Everything was, you know, there's no place for recreation for the kids anymore, and they're only going to drinking dance clubs with the mob, and these modern times are terrible, you know? But
Yeah.
so Socrates, we're talking, like you said, I think Socrates died like 399 BC, something
Yes.
like that. I'll get
That's
that
about
date wrong.
right. Hmm.
But he was saying kids don't read anymore. They have contempt for authority. They're lazy. And I'm going, the, this is like hilarious. Like I'm an outdoor person. Outward Bound was founded by Kurt Hahn, who lived in a pretty incredible life. Kurt Hahn was a German Jewish educator who was exiled from Germany during Hitler's rise. But Kurt Hahn in the 30s famously said, "These are the declines of modern youth." The 1930s, advanced locomotion, right? Like
Hmm.
the fastest car, which no one could own after the Depression, went what, like 40 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Like these
Yeah.
things are hilarious when you look at it.
Hmm.
And so we didn't, when Nevin started doing these interviews, he just created a Dropbox folder that we shared called Kids These Days. And I was like, I don't know about that as a book title. But once I started really reading about it, and then you tie in how things change with mental health labels, right?
Yeah.
So and the treatment of kids based on the label. So we wrote about in the introduction how we centered the introduction about the rise of the opioid epidemic and how everybody sat around and no one did anything. And still the people responsible for a lot of this also kind of got away with it still. Like the biggest stain on their thing is like a Netflix biopic, right? Like, so we wrote about this and I said, but let me share some ideas that have come from the mental health world that are really similar. So like
Mm.
when ADHD started in the rise, the interesting thing about therapies is the treatment often comes before the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So so Ritalin. Ritalin was created by a European chemist for his wife Marguerite, who he thought was a little bit too overweight and wasn't focused on practicing tennis. So he created synthesized methylphenidate and called it the Rita line for Marguerite, whose nickname was Rita.
Wow.
Rita line. Now, It only took someone to go, we
Wow.
should test this on kids in children's homes in Maryland. I think it was Maryland. We should test this on them. And then they went, oh my gosh, these kids on stimulants they're really well behaved. And it's like, well, stimulants are
Mm,
undefeated. We all drink coffee, for the most part, right? So
yeah. Wow.
it came out of culture. Like Adderall was a weight loss drug that was bought by a small pharmaceutical company that they rebranded with a marketing team to say they wanted an inclusive terminology, ADD for all, Adderall. And so these
Mm,
these
wow.
things they don't magically come from a laboratory of objectivity. They come from a place and from people. So we really wanted people to see these things. So the more that gets into the ether of how we talk about kids, it's no wonder to me we medicate more of them because it's in our everyday language. The
Wow.
last one I'll say, the Patient Health Questionnaire 9, the PHQ-9,
Mm-hmm.
it's the most widely used screening tool for
It is.
depression.
Yeah.
11,000 studies, I think, have used this. It's got very riveting questions like, do you sleep too much or sleep too little?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
who's going to answer this question accurately? We all sleep too little. And then depending on the day, we might say we slept too much. I don't
Right.
know,
Right.
right? That was created by the marketing team for Zoloft. Like it wasn't like this stuff
Well.
is hilarious. It's actually hilarious, but when it's in the wrong hands, it's really scary. Like
Yeah.
that a marketing team can create how we divide and medicalize and pathologize people. So
Wow.
the Kids These Days effect is very funny. And also, if we live it out in a medicalized way that divides people into categories and tells us how we're going to treat those people, that felt really like othering and
Mm,
really problematic to me. But
yeah.
also interesting and funny, but not always funny, haha.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR built to support you in the day-to-day work of running your business. If you're a health or wellness practitioner, you already know. The care you provide starts well before your patient arrives and extends far beyond the treatment room. Jane is here to support every part of that experience. With online booking, your clients can book at a time that works for them. And with features like waitlist notifications, they'll even be able to grab last-minute openings when they pop up. It's an easy way to keep your schedule full while giving your clients the care they need. During your appointment, Jane's AI-powered documentation feature can help you thoughtfully take notes so you can stay present with the person in front of you. And after appointments, you can end your time together on a healing note, not a transactional one, by charging the card on file and rebooking before they head out the door. To learn more about how Jane can support you and your clients, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to get started with Jane, you can use our code TRIAD1MO for a 1-month grace period on your new account. When your work is about people, Jane supports the process. Yes, but very
Yeah.
much like, yeah,
Yeah, what's going on
absolutely. Yeah.
here?
Yeah, like, why are we doing it that way? Because I honestly, I work in dialysis now, and I was nodding my head vigorously when you mentioned a PHQ-9 because we
Mhm.
do them all the time. And when I read the questions to the patients, I'm always like, this is the craziest. Why am I asking it this particular way? Because on any given day, you might, and what I think is sleeping enough or sleeping too much is not the same as what you might think. It's so it makes
Yeah.
complete sense that it doesn't make sense to me because it was created by a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. And I'm not like a big, like, oh, big pharma is coming to get us. I think it's a natural thing that happens when there's money involved and
Mhm.
when the culture and the society of the time are getting around it. So what I think has happened is I don't think let me say it this way. I don't think there's as many bad actors as some people in the anti-psychiatry movement will say. But I think there's a lot of us who play along with it and don't really call it out for what it needs to be called out at. So, you know, I think that we can really get real about this by showing the history of these ideas. And a good example of this, where this played out, and I just wrote this on my Substack the other week. Asperger's, right? It disappeared. It
Yep.
magically disappeared because a Nazi created the idea, right? Because Hans Asperger, who played along or not, he pretended he didn't, but he referred people to the Nazi child euthanasia program. People realized maybe we shouldn't be propping this guy up anymore. So they rolled everything into the autism spectrum disorder to forget this bad actor altogether. I was like, this is progress, people. But we had to really learn where this idea came from to understand why it was important. Because he used the term children are autistic psychopaths, the kids that he thought were autistic, which could be the language of the time. That's 70 years ago.
Yeah.
But he was also simultaneously playing along with a child euthanasia, like a really horrific, awful thing. He had referred 3-year-olds to that psychiatric ward that was responsible for thousands of deaths. So that, I think, is progress. If we learn about where these ideas come from, it's really important, because words change, but it's also how are we actually also maybe unintentionally, unwillfully kind of promoting these ideas that might have come from a really dark place.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these are ideas that many of us have not thought about. So I know, just like I said, in just the pieces that I've read, I'm like, I hadn't really thought about that in that way. Let me sit with this for a moment before I have my own ideas about it, because it's not something I know.
That's exactly the approach we took with writing. Was I don't want someone, like, I'm totally anti the social media bans. I don't want to have a fight that proves that I'm right about this. If anything, the way culture's going, I'm on the total losing end of this argument, right? But I want people to wrestle with the ideas. I want the reader to think about things. Like someone interviewed me a few weeks ago, and after they stopped recording, they said, well, Will, I want to talk to you about a few pages that I really disagreed with. And I went, why'd you stop recording? I was like, we can have this conversation. You don't have to prop me up. We presented research and evidence, and I'm not going to be defensive if you disagree, because you could culturally disagree, and that's far more important than whatever peer-reviewed bullshit I cited in the book, Like, yeah, it's not going to work for everyone. I want you to disagree so you can make an informed decision about things.
Absolutely. And so my oldest son is 12. And so as the kids these days would say, you don't want to be glazed. You don't want to be green. I appreciate that.
No. Yeah,
I
totally.
appreciate that. Yeah. So taking a step back from even that. So you describe youth mental health as a wicked problem, and you're digging deeper into the pieces of that problem. But before going any further, I want to discuss what that term means, and why is it impossible to find like a single definitive solution, something like banning phones in school or banning social media? Why won't one specific thing work?
So wicked problems it's a sociological term that some researchers came up with, where sometimes there are problems that simple solutions make worse. And then we learned another term from the toxins researcher. He talked about regrettable substitutions. So if you think, like, people used to fall asleep smoking cigarettes and then light their couch on fire. So he put flame retardants in all the couches, which was a total toxin that led to birth defects, increased cancer rates, all these problems. So sometimes the simple solution appears to solve this problem, but not the other problem. And so the argument of wicked problems was there are rules to wicked problems, and I don't have these right in front of me, so I'm remembering these off the top of my head. But one of my most favorite one is when you have a wicked problem, there's no stopping rule. You'll actually never know when you solved it, right? So when with your children, sure, but we hear on headlines, youth mental health crisis, kids are all fragile. When will we solve fragility? I don't know. Like everyone's called kids fragile for 2,000 years. So I don't know. We can't medicate our way through the fragility. We can't therapy our way through, can't educate our way through. So we wanted to show that this is also far more complicated than blaming this on one single variable. And so this is something, as you a social worker and having worked in schools, and then again, working in dialysis as well. You meet somebody and someone wants to tell you, here's the client, here's the person, here's the problem. So let's say it's social media. And then you go, oh, but they grew up in a house with, substance use and all of these adverse childhood experiences. And you go, is it social media? Or is it this? Is it poverty? Is it, parents being laid off work, parents going to jail, the opioid epidemic? Is it? So we like to think that this one thing that's outside of the client, like a smartphone or social media, is the cause of what's wrong with inside the client. Where the truth is, if we're going to blame anything outside of the client, we should look at everything, the whole world that the client lives in. So the funny thing about like social media bans is like, when I was a kid, R-rated movies existed. We didn't ban all VHS tapes.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we equip parents to do the parenting? And by the way, parenting is always hard work. Kids, not that I'm a kids these days sayer, but kids can be a pain in the ass, right? They're hard work. And it's amateur sport. You'll never be an expert. The oxymoron of parenting expert. I'm like, we should just give this person one more kid. We'll see how they do. Give them a new one. They'll be brutal. Like expert at doing something 2 times, But one thing culturally that has changed as well is we have less kids today. And when we have less kids, we become more protective of our kids. Rightly so. But that means we also have to check our anxiety, check in on ourselves about what we're going through, going, oh my gosh, my kid, are they okay? Are they, this stuff. But what happens is then we outsource to some expert who's going to tell you there's a single solution to solve this problem. And that's not accurate. So Wicked Problems was a way to keep the book. And there's too many ideas in the book. Like it's too much scope. And so, our mantra was youth mental health from 40,000 feet. So we're not going to blame one thing, but we're going to look at a lot of things, just like a menu at a restaurant. Like you choose what you think is most important to do.
Nice. So earlier you were discussing concern about medicalizing, lived experience or just labeling normal adolescent struggles as mental health condition, and how that can do more harm than good. I want to dig deeper into that a little bit. Like I said, as a parent, I've struggled, and I think Peter and I were talking about this before, but I've struggled in seeing the things that the books say are abnormal in my children's behavior, but then trying to figure out, like, is that what makes them them? Is this just how they experience the world and they're just showing that to me? Like, where is that line? So I'm curious to know, like, what, more on your thoughts about that medicalizing just lived experience, how kids just live the life these days.
Well, there's a few current events that happened. I don't know if any of you saw when Mattel released Autistic Barbie recently. And when this came out, Autistic Barbie was characterized as wearing headphones and like holding a fidget spinner and maybe not making a bit of eye contact. Now, I'm all for raising awareness of everything.
Yeah.
But Barbie doesn't have a brain. It's a piece of
Mhm.
plastic. And so now we've said autism is characterized by gadgets. And I even asked AI to draw a line from the most neurotypical people to the most neurodivergent, and the line it drew was headphones. And I went, that's not how you get to know somebody. That's a
Mhm.
very thin description of a person. So when we looked at the rising rates of pathologizing and labeling, we found a study that I think was really important. It's a few hundred, I think like 400 kids in California. And they were surveyed in sixth grade about, do you identify with having a mental health label? Something like that. They had a mental health symptomology checklist and a self-esteem measure. The kids that identified with having a mental health label 2 years later, if they had dropped that label, had the biggest increase in self-esteem, regardless of any change to their mental health symptomology. Now, self-esteem, we know, super overhyped in the 80s, but also still kind of a protective factor.
Yeah.
So, what that kind of got me starting to look at was these rising rates. During the last presidential election, people surveyed, 72% of young people, I think it was characterized by like 18 to 25-year-olds, said their mental health label was important to their identity. And I
Hmm.
started thinking, why would that be important to your identity? But in mental health, we do something that, and I was trained in solution focused therapy. And so that means I'm a bit of like a step sibling to narrative therapy, right?
Okay.
Interestingly, because I'm in Adelaide at the moment, the Dulwich Center where narrative therapy was created is like 5 minutes down the road, which is kind of cool. But narrative therapy was a lot about, okay, so you've got this internalized label, but what does that really mean? You know? And so one of the things that we started thinking about was, if 72% of young people today are saying, I am, insert mental health language, we don't do this with
Mhm.
common medical, you don't say, I am the flu.
Yeah.
If we believe these are disorders, right? Like, I am COVID, I am cancer, I am chickenpox. We don't do this, but we say, I am depressed, I am attention deficit,
Mm-hmm.
I am autistic, I am neurodivergent, I am this thing. And so what we started looking at is, when people internalize these things, does it lead to positive outcomes for them? And quite often, the research indicated that it actually either keeps you stagnant, or at best, it gives you, when you learn that someone, I remember when I was in ninth grade, Edward Hallowell, like the guru of ADHD in the early 2000s, he diagnosed me with ADHD, right? And he said, I don't even know how you finished eighth grade. I was like, finally, someone understands me. I was like, I'm telling you, this schooling thing sucks, right? But one of the things is, what next?
Mm.
So students like I teach social work, so my students are mostly older, like maybe in their 30s. And some will come up to me, and predominantly mature aged women will say, you have ADHD. And I go, well, that terminology doesn't interest me anymore. And I
Mm.
said, but I'm in a place of privilege where I get to do whatever I want. I write whatever I want. I work how I want. Like, it's not, I don't need that term. My wife will tell you a very different side of that story, right? So students would come up to me and they go, when I got diagnosed, I finally understood how hard it was for me to parent, to maintain full-time work, to be a single mom, to be these things. And I go, this is awesome. And they go, why is this awesome? I go, because now you get to learn about yourself, and you get to figure yourself out, and you get to figure out how you learn, how you want to work, how you want to do
Mhm.
your life, how you want to raise your kids. But if you do that while simultaneously trying to fit into the system, you are going to burn out. You're going to lose it. So I always say to them, you can take this label, get this sense of euphoria about who I am. Oh my gosh, I finally understand myself. But then it's what you do next that's most important. So the labels to us became very passive, right? Like in
Mhm.
school, I was just at this mental health conference, and everyone was saying, we work with like neurodiversity. This term is another one that's really changed over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And they go, we work with neurodivergent kids. And then I listen to them talk about their curriculum, and I go, still sounds like school sucks. Like, like this doesn't sound like reading, arithmetic, chemistry. Like, oh, I'm going.
Mhm.
It's like just because you labeled them to make them fit into your world doesn't mean
Mhm.
you've made any radical change here.
Right.
You know. So sometimes I think, are we labeling just to put things in categories,
Mm.
or are we labeling to actually lead to better care? And many of us know,
Mm.
like you already talked about the PHQ-9 in your work, that
Mhm.
if you want someone's private health insurance to pay for their service,
Gotta do it.
you're going to diagnose them.
Mhm.
And so that to us was really interesting. And I linked that to my experience growing up in Washington, D.C., which was all dressed up that politics are really important and we should all worry about this all the time. And I like thinking about politics, but like I've also worked in West Virginia, and a red person in West Virginia is different than a red person in Washington, D.C. And a red
Mhm.
person in Alaska is very different from a red person in West Virginia and a red person in Washington, D.C. And when I brought my blue friends to West Virginia, they thought everybody was an insurrectionist. And I went, actually, you should probably just talk to these people. Because do you
Yeah.
see, if you opened your eyes, there's pride flags everywhere here.
Mm.
That people are much more inclusive than you think they are if
Mhm.
you talk to people. So I found this sort of othering, and one of my PhD supervisors was is a Maori academic, so an indigenous person from New Zealand, and she, by the way, is incredible for talking about the spirit of social work. She helped write a whole social work curriculum in New Zealand in Maori
Wow.
language. Amazing,
Wow.
right? She's incredible. But
Wow.
she writes a lot about othering people and how the danger of othering is it's easier to treat someone like crap if you've othered them away from you, whether that's
Mhm.
skin color, age, cultural background. Othering is just not often a great idea. But what we've done with kids is done it in the name of mental health. That we've said,
Yeah.
I know more about what you need, what you are, based on a term that still is different for every person that experiences it. So that was the part that was really important to us. So I'm not anti someone helping to get understanding about something, but at the same time, it's what's next. Are we just going to medicate and then leave them alone? Because that's probably not going to work. Not that medication doesn't work, but it still needs an active
Need to, yeah, to
aspect.
work with. Mhm.
Yeah, to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of staying on that same vein, you discussed the extinction of experience and the
Mm.
decline of just like play and kids, being rough and tough and, skins and scabs all over the place. Why is the physical risk and the independent exploration so vital for teenagers' psychological development?
Yeah, great. This is a great question. So when you look at, like, for instance, and this is hilarious again, kids these days affect, there was a school in Queensland, Australia that banned cartwheels. No cartwheels. No unsupervised headstands or cartwheels on the playground, right? Where I came from, Maryland, Montgomery County Public Schools, they banned tag, football, baseball, no two kid on the monkey bars at one time. And I just thought to myself, what teacher went to college, got a bunch of student debt, right? And thought, this is going to be worth it when I ban tag on the playgrounds, right? Like, come on. This is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So when you buy it, and not to call children dogs, when you buy a puppy, you know, you rescue a dog. The most important thing you can do is get it around other dogs. right? It'll learn how to fight. It'll learn how to play fight. It'll learn how,
Wow.
dogs learn mouthing where it looks like fighting, but they're not really biting you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's rough and tumble play. That's learning how to interact with other people, learning about the body, learning about consent. Like, no, I don't want you to fight me or roughhouse with me or touch me anymore. I don't want that any longer. So in the chapter, The Extinction of Experience, we interviewed Ellen Beat Hansen Sandseder, who in Norway is the guru of risky play. She's incredible. And she talks about how she did a program with kids 20 years ago in incarceration, so young people in a jailing system, which I know is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the right word I would use about Norway because they wouldn't be called jail, I don't think. Probably in a children's home. And they did whittling, like whittling sticks. And she said everybody was terrified of giving these kids knives. They're like, they're going to kill us, right? And she goes, but by the end of it, when they interviewed the kids that cut themselves, like accidentally, were like proud of what they learned from this risky play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't mean go give your child a knife and get them to hurt themselves. I don't mean that. But for everybody listening, and think about our anxiety as a parent, as a caregiver. And I don't mean anxiety like our apprehension of things. Your
Mm-hmm.
child, let's say, is climbing a tree, doing just a normal childhood thing. And then we say from the bottom, be careful while you're up there, right? Now your child, who is trying to master something, has to simultaneously worry about you. Now they're not focused on what they're learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going, now your child's probably more at risk of hurting themselves because now they're going, what's going on down there while they're reaching for the next branch? So the reason it's really vital is it lets young people wrestle with the world, to be around people, to interact with people. Like if one of the things that happened in schools around the Western world when things, and I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist about this, but when people became scared of talking about certain subjects that the news kind of told us all that was off limits and cancer, whatever we call it, right? And this was much easier for me to see while I was in Australia. We talked about everything in our class. I had a lecture theater of 300 people. I go, let's talk vaccines, people. Let's talk this thing. Like it's much different. It's not as, Australia's not as, politics are boring in Australia. It's like the greatest gift in the world, right? It's amazing. But so when things became off limits and the survey research is starting to come out, that many kids didn't know how to approach a topic, didn't learn how to talk about, let's say, racism, didn't learn how to talk about LGBTQI plus stuff. And the thing is, what they did is they stayed silent instead of asking questions. And so I don't mean asking questions as in being an asshole. I mean, did people actually did they learn about this stuff?
Yeah.
Instead of just being told, this is the way it is, you have to do this. So I think play is actually a really important way to think about these issues, that interacting with people. Like I went back to Maryland the other week and I went to where I did my undergrad at UMBC. And there was a prospective student event. And I just wanted an excuse to call this work. So I reached out to my professor. I said, can I come to this, please? I had not seen this person. I graduated my undergrad in 2012. And I went and I walked into her office and there was like 5 students in her office all doing homework. And I was sitting there going, this is what I remember about being at UMBC. I loved this experience. Like the teachers were nice, isn't it? And the teacher came up, she gave me a hug. She goes, oh, I remember so much of our classes together. And I went, bullshit. It was 2012, not a chance. And she goes, well, you were in a graduating class of 2 white dudes. And let me tell you, you were the most opinionated white dude I've ever taught. And I went, oh, that's kind of funny. And I said, now, full transparency, when we realized you were cool, our whole class, which was mostly women of color, I said, we would all go to lunch every day and drink beer. And then we'd come in and I'd be really opinionated. I
Ready
was
to
like,
go.
we were all having so much fun. I was like, we loved learning with you. But I was like, that is such a refreshing statement. Not that I'm boohooing white dudes here, but like, it was such a refreshing statement because I was like, that's funny and interesting and gives context to what the way I learned,
Yeah.
my learning experience. So I think so many kids, if we don't get them playing, hanging out with other people, diversity, what the words really mean, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, we want them out there interacting with everybody.
Right.
So like for me, like my partner Renee, she'll say to me sometimes, you can be critical of therapy. Would you ever go to a therapist? And I go, I would go to the most culturally diverse from me person in the world. I want to learn from the farthest left field from me, and I'd be so stoked to be a part of that. So I want the play part to not just be put your kid outside, give them a knife and say, come back when the street lights come on, like our parents did, I
Yeah.
want I want it to be about how they interact with people, how they're around others, and how they interact with the classroom. That the classroom is supposed to be an intellectual playground to
Yeah.
play with ideas, to figure things out together. And going back to Jane Addams, little known story no one ever talks about. Jane Addams ran a summer camp through Hull House called the Bowen Country Club, which was designed to end racism. People of all backgrounds playing together in the outdoors and playing intergenerationally, different age groups together. We really worried about bullying. Like you want to solve 12-year-old bullying, plop in a 17-year-old. It'll be sorted like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most people will do the right thing when they're needed to do the right thing.
Agreed. Agreed. Nice, nice. So I know that you finish out the book or you conclude the book by talking about positive deviance. And you've mentioned it already in our conversation today. Can you explain what you mean by that and how it serves as a roadmap for adults who want to resist uncooperative systems?
Oh, such a good question. So, positive deviance, this is an idea that came out of nutrition research in the 60s. The Save the Children Foundation, they went to Vietnam and they were like, we're going to solve malnutrition. And they ran out of money. And all they had was like big agriculture's food pyramid, like the bread pyramid. And they were like, what do we do now? So what they decided, two of these people, they said, why don't we find the healthiest kids in the poorest neighborhoods and figure out what they're doing? And they found them. And what they found were these families actually totally bucked the mainstream. So in Vietnam, they were eating shellfish and little crabs out of the rice paddies. They left the skins on their sweet potatoes. And really, most importantly, when their children got sick or had diarrhea, they fed and kept their kids hydrated, which was not the cultural norm at the time. So what they did is they said, why don't we get these people and get them to run cooking classes for everybody else? And so they found the cultural deviant of this. And so what we started saying is, like, first off, if you look at youth mental health, we say 25% of youth have a diagnosis. That's not 100%. We could start looking at what's working and share more of what's working. And instead of training, for instance, therapists into whatever manual or whatever measure or whatever the rules are, start teaching people, again, going back to play, how to find the deviant and showcase the deviant. So one of the most important things, like of I've learned in my work, is like I was writing about America's troubled teen industry and harmful practices and stuff, and residential treatment, and like nobody cared, right? Nevin and I are just writing these things. I'm writing with some other people. but I'm always willing to be someone's follower. I'm like, that sounds cool. I'm gonna really showcase your work. And then that sounds cool. I'm gonna really showcase your work. And accidentally I showcased Paris Hilton's, journalist's work. And then Paris Hilton releases her documentary in 2020. And so the reason Paris Hilton endorsed our book is because when it came to the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, Nevin and I had been writing for 10 years about the topic. And because we were like, why are we harming kids in the name of institutionalized therapy? This is not good. And I don't mean this as like a look how wonderful I am. I mean it that the deviant is supposed to do the right thing because it's the right thing all the time.
Yeah.
So sometimes, even though we're stuck in an uncooperative system, surrounded by stubbornly uncooperative people, looking at you, the university, right? We're stuck with these things. The truth of the matter is, if we keep doing the right thing quite often, and we keep helping others do the right thing and showcasing the other positive deviants, we'll build an army of positive deviants that then someone else will have to deviate against us for what we got wrong,
Yeah.
So I love the notion of like, it's not, I know like the language recently has been burning everything down. I get it. Like there's a lot of shitty things out there, but it's about where is the good thing happening that we can really showcase and make that louder than the bad thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. And Will, honestly, I'm not like to end right now, but as we come to a close, I really could talk to you forever. For parents, educators, clinicians, even who want to dive deeper into these types of unscripted questions and just questioning everything around us, where can they go to find your research and the resources mentioned in your book?
Well, if you're lucky, you can find my research behind the academic paywall. So that means probably can't find it. No, email me if you're interested in anything. You can find my email online. I am a total open book. Speaking of unscripted, that's the first step of positive deviance, is to ask unscripted questions. So trying to ask a question that helps us see the world a little bit differently to find a more unique kind of solution. But I have a Substack called Unscripted, which is fun. I just talk to people like I've just talked with you and see what the heck comes out of it, and write about random ideas like autistic Barbie, and write about things that I think are interesting in current events. And but I'm on all the social medias until we're all banned from them, which is probably inevitable. Just kidding. But I'm available, and I love having people connect, and I love conversations like this. It's so fun because I even though the book is done, it's still important to keep figuring out the ideas. Like it still lives on in this brain, like figuring it all out. So it's just such an honor and such a treat to chat with you. I really, really enjoyed it.
I concur. This has been a really great conversation, and I really appreciate you speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. Make sure to follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. And if you like our show, give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found at our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.